I had an idea that I wanted to make a painting with figure and ground the same color, but I didn't know what image I would be using. And it couldn't be a human figure because people just didn't do such a thing in the early 70s, so I needed something big and powerful to hook into. It was a vehicle for emotion and paint.
I did not want a small gesture standing at the easel with a sable brush.
I thought someone could tell me how to paint, but I never found that person. I had to just settle down and try. I thought someone could tell me how, but I found nobody could. They could tell you how they painted their landscape, but they couldn't tell me to paint mine.
In looking at the great women artists of the 20th century, there's a few things that we should understand. First of all, what is the definition that I'm using for great? Well, there are primarily two main things that I think of as defining great artists. And I arrived at this understanding by looking at the artists of the past, the artists that are recognized in art history. And those two things that define great are innovation and personal voice. Innovation has to do with creating something new, something that's never been seen before. Also something that adds a new concept to art history. Personal voice has to do with having a recognizable style, so that whenever someone sees the painting, they recognize immediately that it's that particular artist. It was around the changeover from the 1800s to the 1900s, the turn of the 20th century, that Paris was the center of the art world. And it was around this time, in the environs of Paris, that three important female artists emerged. They're now called the three grand dames of Impressionism. They were Berthe Morisot, Mary Cassatt, and Eva Gonzalez.
It's as if my mind creates shapes that I don't know about. I get this shape in my head, and sometimes I know what it comes from and sometimes I don't.
Georgia O'Keeffe was one of the first artists of the 20th century to break the mold of women artists being subservient to men. She attained a status of greatness on a par with any other artist of the 20th century.
It doesn't really matter if the color isn't absolutely right, if the picture feels right.
Frida Kahlo was a Mexican artist. Her work has been lauded in Mexico as emblematic of national and indigenous tradition. It is also celebrated by feminists for its uncompromising depiction of the female experience and form. Her work has also been described as surrealist. In 1938, André Breton, a leader of the surrealist movement, described Kahlo's art as a ribbon around a bomb. Helen Frankenthaler was born on December 12, 1928, in New York, on New York's Upper East Side. Helen had a strong and willful personality, and this became a profound factor in both her art and her career.
And I think I've had a summer of making small, careful, after nature watercolors, and got into my own place on 23rd Street and felt sort of let her rip. I literally wanted to break free, put it on the floor, throw the paint around.
Joan Mitchell was an essential member of the abstract expressionist movement. She's generally thought to be part of the second generation abstract expressionist. She was born in 1925 in the United States in Chicago. Mitchell often worked large. Many of her paintings were 15 or 20 feet in size. Mitchell was inspired by landscape, nature, and poetry, yet her intent was not to create recognizable images, but to convey emotions. Marisol Escobar, generally referred to as Marisol in the art world, was one of the premier artists of the 20th century. She came to the fore in the 60s during the pop art era. Marisol decided that the emotional heaviness of the abstract expressionists was not her cup of tea. She turned to humor as a main crux in her work, developing a vernacular comprised of mixed media, carving, nailing, gluing, painting, drawing, and plastering. She also included found objects and occasionally television media. Nothing was off limits. Elizabeth Murray is an important artist who came to the fore in the 1970s in New York. Murray's paintings were part expressionism, part abstraction, and part pop art. She was one of the first artists to start working with shaped canvases.